Hello. Today we're going to talk about DataFi, an interesting concept in Arweave. This Arweave network provides you trustless, permissionless, and composable capabilities on a blockchain. This series is going to take some of the interesting tools of the Arweave ecosystem and show how they can kind of be bundled or composed together to create interesting features and functionality. This is a lot to take in, kind of meat, or this idea of uh, Permaweb applications and atomic NFTs and profit sharing tokens can be composed together to create exciting and interesting applications. So I have a little sketch that kind of shows the concept of DataFi, where you can take a Permaweb app, which can exist of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images and so much more. And you take the SmartWeave technology that lazily evaluates smart contracts and applies um, dynamic state on top of this immutable data weave. And you combine those together with the um, smart contract functionality of atomic NFTs, giving you the ability to transfer ownership and see balances of certain things. And then finally, profit sharing tokens. So, changing the dynamic nature of the ownership from just instead of a single wallet owner to a collection of owners that all have tokens to represent that collection, and leveraging that information dynamically within the application itself. So I know that's a lot, and to try to really hone in into the concept, my goal is to first talk about kind of each component. So we'll do the Permaweb and SmartWeave today, and then we'll, take that and go into atomic NFTs, and then we'll take that and go into PSTs. So this will be at least a three-part series. So a Permaweb app is essentially a static site or a single page web application that's stored and served on the Arweave network via an Arweave gateway. So you can basically get a Arweave transaction ID, connect that to arweave.net or any gateway, saying slash and then transaction ID, and then your application loads. And that's what we call a Permaweb application because it's on Arweave, it is available forever. That URL will be reachable forever. What is a SmartWeave contract? So a SmartWeave contract is a lazily evaluation that removes the burden of the contract execution from the network to the nodes of the smart contract users. And what we're going to do is take a Permaweb app and we're going to put it inside a SmartWeave contract. And then that Permaweb app is actually going to execute um, the interactions in the SmartWeave contract. And for our purposes, it's going to be super simple. It's going to just capture the visits that are recorded via the app. And I've actually got it working, and I'll show you a quick demo. So this Permaweb app that is this ID up here is our app. And what it's doing is when I refresh, it's calling to get the latest state of the contract, which is the same ID. And if we go to sonar.redstone tools and we paste um, that transaction ID in, you can see that it's also a contract. So this application is not only an application, but it's a smart contract, and it's got the code here, and we've got our current state of 23. And every time I modify that, I just click visit, and it's going to ask me to sign in and accept. It's going to and that's 24. So now if I go to state here, probably need to refresh. Let's refresh. And it's now 24. So this is really, really cool. You can have a Permaweb application that's wrapped in a smart contract, and then the Permaweb application can actually execute functions on that smart contract. So let's kind of walk through how that works. And again, we'll figure out, all the steps and pieces. So I have some notes here where we'll, kind of create our first contract, and then we'll actually create a deployment script to deploy the contract source and so on. So we'll just walk through that together, and hopefully all of this will make sense. So our smart contract can be JavaScript, or it can be Rust or Go, or um, I, I think assembly or WASM assembly script. But for this purpose, we're gonna use JavaScript. And so our JavaScript, we have this handle function. So every um, SmartWeave contract needs an entry point, and it's this handle function. And the handle gets the current state and then any actions. And this, if you're familiar with tools like Redux, this is very similar to a Redux reducer that you would handle. And just like any functional concept, you want to make sure that it's pure. In other words, there's no side effects. It's not making external calls, etc. Now there are features with the Redstone Warp um, SmartWeave toolkit where you can do internal um, contract calls, but we're not going to talk about that today. But that's really exciting stuff. So with this, we have our handle function, and it's simply going to see if any functions are included in this functions object, and they match this action input function. And if they do, then we call that with state and action. So we have this input function called visit, and it takes the state and action. We take the state and the .count property, we increment it by 1, and we return state. So that's our contract. Extremely simple, um, but a PST is a contract, and an atomic NFT is a contract. So in the future, we'll actually start to use a little bit more sophisticated contracts in these demos. But that's our contract. And what we have to do is deploy that contract in a transaction. And typically, you would use the Redstone SDK to deploy it. But in our case, we're not able to do that. And I'll try to explain why as clearly as I can. Um, so currently, the functionality of the SmartWeave Warp SDK does not allow us to put custom data when we create the contract. So we have to actually call and put the transaction directly on Arweave, um, so that we can add custom data. And in order to do that, um, we you know the Redstone SmartWeave SDK needs to see that, and if we put it in a bundle transaction, it won't be able to see those transactions. So I try to explain it better in the notes, so we'll go through it. But the gist is for now, and I think it'll change in the future. But for now, we have to kind of upload our transactions on chain using just the regular Arweave toolkit. So, but with that, we're gonna kind of create this deploy script to do that. And we'll bring in Arweave from Arweave, and we're going to init Arweave with a host of arweave.net, port 443, and protocol HTTPS. Okay. And then what we want to do is create a transaction. So in order to create a transaction, we need to get our source code. So we'll import fs from fs, and we'll get our source fs.read file sync, and that'll be contract.js, and it'll be UTF-8. So that'll be our source code. And now we want to create a transaction with our source code. And then we need to add some tags that are required for a contract. So we have content type, application slash JSON, and we have app name. And these are, and actually I got it wrong. It's application slash JavaScript, because this is the source code of the contract source. So there's the contract source, and then there's the contract. So this is the source, and here we have SmartWeave contract source, and we're going to add another tag for the version, and it'll be 03.0, which is the current version. So those are our tags, and then we're going to sign the transaction and post it. And what we need is a wallet. So we need to load up our wallet, which we've got a wallet here that we can use. So we'll grab it. All right. So that should be the code to create our contract source. And we'll just console log tx.id. Source. And if we maybe bump this up a little bit, rid of that. Call node deploy.js. Cool. So we've deployed our contract source with this identifier. We'll just keep track of that. And I'm going to go ahead and comment out this for now, because we're just going to append to this file our other stuff. So the next thing we will need to do is deploy our Permaweb index.html file and our Permaweb I think it's assets slash index something.js file. So we need to deploy those files, and we can't deploy them because we haven't created them yet. So we need to do that. But then the final piece is we'll deploy our contract with a path manifest file inside. In the path manifest file, you'll see kind of demonstrates the routes of the Permaweb app. It's kind of the router. So let's create our Permaweb application, and we installed Svelte. We're using Svelte, and we installed Arweave wallet connector. So when we click our button, it's going to pop up the Arweave.app wallet. And couple of things when you're using Svelte for Permaweb apps, you need to set this base equal in the byte config. If you're using Svelte in byte or Vite, whatever it's called. So you need to do that, or it won't be happy. And now what we want to do is just modify, and I've already done it, our index.html file, added some tailwind stuff to make things look okay. And then we're bringing in this Redstone SmartWeave bundle, which is a pretty large file. It's like a 500 KB file. So I just don't want to embed that in my transpiled JavaScript. So that's our index.html file. Nothing out of the ordinary there. And then we're going to go into our app.svelte file. We're going to just delete all of that stuff, and we're going to create a script tag and import Arweave from Arweave, and import Arweave wallet, web wallet from Arweave wallet connector. And then we're going to grab the Redstone development kit and grab their SmartWeave web factory. So the Redstone development kit, because we included it as a script tag in our HTML, it'll be available on the global scope. And now we can init our Arweave object. We're going to leave this blank because we'll be running on the gateway. So there's no need to set that. And then we're going to initialize our wallet using new Arweave web wallet. And we're just going to pass in a parameter, hello. And then we'll set our wallet URL. Arweave.app. Cool. And now we're ready to create our SmartWeave object from Redstone. So we'll say const SmartWeave, all lowercase, and we'll call SmartWeave web factory dot memcached Arweave. Okay. So that'll set up our SmartWeave object, and now our Visits is a counter, so we'll declare a variable called count and set it equal to 0. And then we're going to get the, we're going to do a little trick to get the contract ID by just grabbing the location path name and removing the backslashes of the location path name. And if you look up here, we have, kind of the forward slash and the backslash. We're going to remove those and get what's in the middle. And that will be our contract ID. Now, maybe better ways to do this, but for this demo, it works great. So we will fire up our contract. I'm doing SmartWeave contract and giving it our contract ID. Awesome. So we've got two functions. One function we want to load when the page loads to actually get the current count. So that's going to be an async function called getVisits. And it's simply going to return the contract read state. And the read state function will actually run without having to be connected to a wallet. So that's why we want to run the read state function. And it's a promise. So we're just going to essentially pop the state property off of that promise by just saying res.state. And so when we call it in our markdown, it'll give us our state and we can paint state.count. And then the other function we want to create is the do visit. So when the user clicks the visit button, we want a handler to do the visit. And we're going to check and see if our wallet is connected. And if it's not, we're going to connect. And once we're connected, we're going to call contract.connect and tell it to use our web wallet, right? So our Arweave.app wallet, and you do that just by passing string use wallet. And then we're going to actually call bundle interaction. Bundle interaction will go through the Redstone library and actually write the interaction using bundler, which will get a much faster cache response time doing that. So by calling bundle interaction, our execution will be a lot faster. And we're going to pass in our input, and our input object, all we have is a function property that should be the function we want to call in our contract. So we want to call the visit function. So our input object will have a property called function, and it will have visit. And that's how it'll correlate to the contract and call this visit function here, because it'll be in action input function. And then it's going to execute that function, which will execute this code and increment our state by 1, our state count by 1. Pretty cool stuff. And then finally, what we want to do is tell the application to get the new visits to show on the screen. So we'll just call visits again, and we're going to declare visits down here and call it an initial time to show the number when we're on the screen. So that's the majority of our app right there, our Permaweb app. And I'll go ahead and paste the markup in. So the most important part of this markup is we've got this await directive, which it's going to grab the visits. And while that's loading, it's just going to show this loading number of visits. Then we get some state, and that state should have a count. So we'll display the count. And then if we get an error, we'll show our error message. And then we'll have our button. And we have an on-click handler to our button. You click do visit. It's going to run that interaction. to increment a visit, and then it's going to rerun the visit, so we should get the updated visits. So that's our Permaweb app. We can kind of see it in action here. So we click visit, we accept, and it's loading, and we get 25. So that's what we just coded. Now we've got that. We want to go and build npm run build. We want to build that into two files. So we have this index HTML file, and we have this assets index and file. So now in our deploy script, we need to write the code to deploy that Permaweb on Arweave, that Permaweb app on Arweave. So we've got this contract ID, and there's no need to add a new contract ID. So I'm just going to say const contract source equals this, and that's our contract source ID. And then what we need to do is actually bring in bundler so that we can load bundler and actually upload our HTML and our JavaScript file via bundler. So to do that, we're going to import up at the top here. Going to import bundler from @bundler network client, and we're just going to npm install that as a dev dependency. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and grab this FC7A 161F, all that, and put that there. And I'll show you why that's important in a minute. Let's fire up a new bundler instance. So we'll do that with the new bundler default, and we'll use node 2 bundler network, Arweave as the currency, and W as our wallet. That looks good. Let's go ahead and read in our assets that we want to upload, and we'll use our fs read file sync, and we'll get index.html, and we'll get the index and then the code here .js. And our next step is to upload the index.html. And so we just call bundler create transaction, giving it our data, and then giving it our tags, and we're setting the tag to text HTML. We sign it and upload it. And this variable here will have our ID, which we'll need that for our path manifest file. And then the next one we want to upload is our index.js file. And again, I'm doing this kind of top down so you can kind of see each step for the demo. So with this one, we create a transaction and we make sure it's application JavaScript, because that's what the file that we're uploading is. And then the last piece of this is to build our path manifest. And our path manifest is kind of a JSON file, and it's got the manifest property, Arweave/path, the version, index with path as index.html, and then that tells Arweave gateway which file is the root file. So when I come to this path here, it's going to say, oh, I need to load the index.html file. If that doesn't exist, it's just going to list a directory of all the paths that are located in this path manifest, and then each path manifest you have the property which represents the logical name, and then an object with an ID that represents the transaction identifier on Arweave. So we've got index, and then we have assets index, blah, blah, blah. So that is our path manifest. That is the content that we want to put into our smart contract. So now that we have all of that, now we are ready to kind of do this thing where we're embedding a Permaweb app into a smart contract. So we're going to go app contract, and then this is just plain old Arweave, right? Arweave create transaction data app, which would be our path manifest. And then we have to add some tags. And I'm just going to paste them in and we can go through each one. So the content type is application x.arweave manifest plus JSON. The app name is SmartWeave Contract. That has to be what it's called. The app version 0.3.0 needs to be there. Contract source. Contract source is the identifier of the contract that we uploaded. So here's our contract source identifier up here. And then the initial state. So our initial state will be this object with the count set to 0. So those are the minimum tags we need to set for our SmartWeave contract. And then finally, we sign it with our wallet, and then we post it or upload it, and then we can print out our contract number here. And once all that is done, then you will have deployed a SmartWeave contract with a Permaweb app encapsulated in it. And then that Permaweb app will actually be able to interact with that SmartWeave contract via its own JavaScript. So let's do node deploy, and I'm not sure, just a little bug here. Hopefully they'll fix that soon, but some of the node apps are not working for that. So anyway, I'm going to save this repository on GitHub so you can kind of check it out. And that's really kind of the gist of the workshop. You can actually see a working version here, and we'll just add another visit just for fun. And yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. The next DataFi part is we're going to be taking the same concept and taking it a next level and turning it into an atomic NFT, which will be pretty cool. So thanks for your time. Hope you have a great day.